Please keep yourself muted and your video off throughout the webinar until it's time for questions. We will be taking questions after the speaker's presentation, so please save them until then. The presenters will be asking polling questions throughout, so please be attentive and be sure to answer. Today, both our speakers will be presenting together. Here are Bob Nixai-Perowitz and Frank McCartney. Bob Nixai-Perowitz is a retired assistant special agent in charge with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. And after 30 years of service throughout his career, Bob worked in various capacities, serving in Buffalo, New York, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Newark, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he retired as an assistant special agent in charge at the DEA Philadelphia Field Division. Bob currently serves as a DEA community outreach specialist for the Philadelphia Field Division, providing drug education and prevention and community outreach throughout the states of Pennsylvania and Delaware. Bob is a proud husband and father of 2 sons. Frank McCartney is the diversion outreach coordinator for the Philadelphia Field Division of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Frank is a civilian who joined the DEA in 2010 and has proudly supported the DEA mission of enforcing drug laws, preventing the distribution of illegal narcotics, as well as the diversion of regulated pharmaceuticals. Since 2017, Frank has engaged communities throughout Pennsylvania and Delaware in support of DEA drug prevention initiatives. The DEA recognizes the importance of demand reduction through education and is passionate about spreading the live drug-free message to all citizens, especially our youth. Frank is an especially proud father of 5 children and is happy to have the opportunity to give back to the community through drug prevention and education. To contact Frank, please email frank.j.mccartney@usdoj.gov. All right, Frank and Bob, the stage is yours. Bob, you're muted.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Frank McCartney. Thank you, Kimberly. We are really happy to be here. Bob is going to start the presentation.
I got it, Frank.
You have it, Bob?
Sorry, I hosted. I couldn't get unmuted. I apologize. You want me to take it, Frank?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Fine.
Well, sorry for the delay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having us today. We are so honored to be here today. And we had a little bit of a technical snafu, but we spoke to you, many of you last May, earlier in the year, and we were so happy to see the initiative and all the things that you were doing and the knowledge you had. So today is probably the most important time to talk about the epidemic that we're in, also within a pandemic. So again, we're with DEA. We're a law enforcement agency, but everything that Frank and I do pertains to drug education and prevention. So today, what we want to do is we're going to have some polling questions. We're going to give you a lot of information, and we're going to talk about prevention. So Kim, if you go to the next slide, please. And so what is prevention? As we go through the presentation today, I want you to really think of holistically and comprehensively. Prevention is not just taking a course on knowing the dangers of drugs. Prevention is a 24/7, 365 days a week. It's a way of life. And again, your theme today was living drug-free, which is great. We're going to talk about that, all the elements and how it's a way of life, things that we could be doing. And then partnerships are so important. That you guys are such a great partner with the Lions Club, the COPE, and the Dope Squad. So we're going to talk about some ideas. But before we get started, what's really important to do is before we talk about strategies, we need to know what the problem is. How do we address it? So we're up to date on all the trends, the drug trends and threats that not only youth, young adults, and adults are facing today. So I want to get started, and Frank will get started with the brain, because that's the best place to start when we talk about prevention. Next slide, please.
So again, good afternoon, and again, thank you for having us. We had mentioned in our last presentation about the impact that substances have on an individual's brain, especially a young person under the age of 25. Bob and I speak to many audiences, but primarily we speak to kids in high school, college, and even elementary and middle school. And the important thing to understand, especially for that audience, is that their brain is not fully developed yet. And a lot of times kids are not aware of that. And when they understand that the impact of drug use is much more substantial on a young person, it may cause them to pause and consider a little bit more about the harm of drugs. So what we hope to do with most of our presentation is to make sure that kids perceive that there is a risk or a danger in drug use. And if there is a perceived risk or danger, that drug use usually declines. So the delay of use, again, is less chance for later use and substance use disorder later on in life. Next, we're going to have some polling questions for you. And I'll be really interested to see, I'm pretty confident and sure that you'll be able to answer these pretty well. But if you could read the polling questions, please.
All right, so the first polling question is, what 3 substances are teens likely to encounter first in their lives?
Okay, so most of you answered alcohol, tobacco, use, and marijuana, and that is correct. These are the 3 most likely substances that younger people will be exposed to. Next, please.
Is vaping safe? Vaping is safe for young people because it is just water vapor and it helps keep them from smoking cigarettes.
So most of you know that, 100% of you know that that's a false answer. And Bob and I will get into more detail later on about some of the hazards of vaping. If nothing else, especially with tobacco, it's multiple more times deadlier or addictive than regular cigarettes. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk more about mixed messages. And as young people, you, more than any other generation before you, are exposed to so many different platforms of misinformation, of information. And within those platforms, many times misinformation is sent out, okay? A lot of times smoking, drinking, vaping, drug use is glamorized, made to look like it's acceptable and that most people do it. This type of mixed messaging can make things very, very confusing. One of the first outreach experiences I had was with a group of Eagle Scouts. And yet one young man basically was telling me that marijuana is okay because it's legal. It's important for you to recognize that just because something is legal, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for you. And tobacco and alcohol are prime examples of that. Many people in our society suffer from diseases associated with the use of these products. Next, please.
Since medical and recreational marijuana has been legalized in many states, it is a harmless drug for teens and adults.
And
again, 100% of you said false. Bob, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Excellent. We're going to go over that in 1 second, but great job, everybody. Excellent demonstration of your knowledge. Nishka, if you could just take the next question, then we'll talk about marijuana a little bit and some of the other things that we just spoke about.
Sure. What is the biggest difference in marijuana available today compared to marijuana that people used to use years and decades ago?
Okay. Next slide, Kim. So most of you got it. It's basically higher THC potency at record levels. So let's go over what we just covered. So we covered a lot of area. And again, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana. That is what teens are going to be exposed to first, for the most part. Okay. So alcohol and tobacco, they're legal products. And marijuana, even though a lot of states have legalized it, 11 states have recreational marijuana or commercial marijuana, and 33 states have medical marijuana. The bottom line is, though, is that marijuana is addictive mentally and physically. And it also, there are many people that are in treatment for marijuana, especially, and it's so important that we start with the brain that Frank talked about, the brain development for teens and young adults, because marijuana has a severe impact on teens and young adults. And the other thing is vaping. Many of you got it right, which is great on all these answers. And the ones that didn't might not have been exposed to the information. But the truth of the matter is vaping is not safe for teens. There's still a lot of research even has to be done for adults. The problem is with vaping, it's not just a water vapor. Most of the time, it's actually an aerosol, fine particles that you're breathing into your system. It has a lot of toxic chemicals that the vaping devices have in and of themselves. So also, what young teens and young adults are using are the flavored e-liquids. They're nicotine liquids, which most of the flavored liquids have nicotine in them, which we know is addictive, and also the cannabis oils. So you take a look at the buds up there. When we talk about THC, and we covered this last spring, it was really good, and most of you knew this, that what THC was. That's what you have to remember every time you talk about THC. It is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. This is what gets you high. Now, years ago, we were talking about marijuana that might have had a THC potency of 4 to 5%. Now, some of the buds that people are smoking nowadays could be in the 20, 30%. Even more alarming, what people are vaping now, the liquids, you look in the middle down there, that vial there, that cartridge, okay, that could be in the 90s, up to 99% THC. Look at a can of beer, for example. If it's got 5% alcohol versus 90% alcohol, that's the difference. It's the same kind of analogy you use with THC. That's how strong it is, okay? And you look in the middle of the brain. So we talk about it. The THC levels in marijuana today are at astronomically high record levels than they've ever been. And they're so detrimental to young people. The other thing about vaping that some people think it's safer because, and it could be safer for adults that are trying to quit smoking, but for teens, it's been shown in teens and young adults that those that try vaping, even though they don't want to smoke cigarettes, they're almost 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes at some point when they start vaping, okay? Edibles, real simple. Edibles are any type of food or drink that's infused with THC and marijuana. And these edibles, the problem is that it takes 30 to 90 minutes for it to have an effect on your body. Many people are going to the hospital because they're overdosing on edibles. It may not be life-threatening, but the problem is that they eat too much of it because there are many products that look delicious, and it takes a long time for it to have an onset. When you smoke or you vape, it usually has almost an immediate effect. It gets into your bloodstream and your lungs. So vaping has killed people. At least 68 people have died. Most of it was from vaping cannabis products. And there's about 2,800 people or more since February that have gotten sick from vaping, okay? And the concentrates on the right-hand side are just showing that that's a massive THC. It's called butter, it's called shatter, it's called other things. But again, the most important thing to understand is THC is at the strongest levels it's ever been. And it's extremely detrimental to young people. Next slide, please. And this is something K2 Spice, it's synthetic cannabinoids. The reason we bring this up, take a look at the packaging, okay? This is sold as oftentimes herbal incense or potpourri, okay? And if you look at that, that is to attract young people. It's happy colors and it's like different figures and things like that that kids and young people like. And K2 Spice, now that you know what THC is, K2 Spice is a synthetic cannabinoid where it's basically a plant material that's sprayed with a very dangerous chemicals. And what happens is trying to mimic THC. It causes paranoia, it causes seizures, convulsions, and you could die from the K2 Spice. And the reason some people use that is because oftentimes it may not show up on a drug test. So you even have adults that are trying to they want to get hired, or they're using marijuana or K2 spice for a certain reason. They'll use K2 because they think it won't show up on a drug test. Next slide, please.
Using painkillers and other pills once or a couple of times just to see how they make you feel is not as dangerous as street drugs because they came from a pharmacy.
Okay, so again, we have a very intelligent audience here. Most of you got that correct, okay? If you go to the next next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about prescription medication. And with most audiences, most people in our society have less of a perceived risk when it comes to prescription medication because it's prescribed by a doctor, because they've had a long history of getting medicine from a doctor for ailments, etc. However, it's important to understand, especially with prescribed opioids, that you need to follow the directions precisely as the doctor tells you. And there needs to be an awareness of the patient that there is a potential for addiction with certain prescriptions. Now, about 10 years ago, the level of education or understanding within our community across the board was not as great as it is today. People have more of an understanding of the addictive power of opioids. There are different pills on the street that are called counterfeit pills. Now, these pills are created by drug dealers using pill presses to look like pills that you get from a pharmacy. But what's even greater of a risk with counterfeit pills is that you don't necessarily have a chemist or a pharmacist creating these pills. You have someone that's a street drug dealer or a cartel that is creating it, and they don't have the education. So therefore, many people overdose on regular pharmaceuticals, but really a lot on the counterfeit pharmaceuticals. Often there's the presence of fentanyl in those counterfeit pharmaceuticals. I have an interesting story to share with you. We were out talking to a group of students that were 9th grade students. One young lady in the audience, very intelligent, had a lot of goals, wanted to become a lawyer, and basically called me out and said, listen, you're not going to tell me that there's 9th grade students using heroin. We only use safe drugs like marijuana and pills, okay? So in that statement, it was a great opportunity for me to further her education or her knowledge or dismiss some disinformation and explain that usually no one starts out using heroin, okay? And a lot of times, not for everyone, for many people, it's a very short bridge from going to those safe drugs to the more deadly street drugs. So that's an important thing to understand as well. Hey, Bob, do you want to talk a little bit about heroin?
Sure. And counterfeit pills. Know this, and we had a little delay in the system here for some reason, the slide, but any drug that you can get from a pharmacy, you can buy on the street. And we literally know that, and I'll talk about fentanyl in a second, but you have no idea when people are using drugs or buying pills on the street, they have no idea what they're getting. Now, heroin, real simple. We've had a heroin problem for years. And we talk about the opioid epidemic. We talk about the painkillers. We talk about heroin, and we talk about fentanyl. So heroin, we had the highest purity heroin on the East Coast, especially Philadelphia was a source city for the tri-state area. Okay. And then many people had started with pills, like Frank said, and they got addicted. They couldn't get a script anymore. Then they got addicted. They shot a bag of heroin because it was $5. Sometimes they're giving free samples. The problem is that heroin several years ago started getting cut with fentanyl, which is basically a white or an off-white powder. Most of it comes from China and also through Mexico. And a lot of precursors are being made in the fentanyl in Mexico. It's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. So when you think about how strong this is, take a look at the penny on the left-hand side there. That speaks for exactly the potency of that. That's a lethal dose of fentanyl. Okay, take a look at the right side, the penny. That's carfentanil. That's a variation of fentanyl. That's 10,000 times stronger than morphine, which is used to make heroin. That's an elephant tranquilizer. These are the drugs that are being cut with for heroin and to adulterate or actually make the drugs purer, the street drugs. The problem is it's showing up in many other drugs too, not just heroin. It's showing up in cocaine, methamphetamine, and other drugs, and counterfeit pills. So we don't have time. In the interest of time, we just want to get through. We want to actually have a discussion with you in a couple of minutes. But really, the important thing to understand is all these street drugs, fentanyl has shown up in most of these drugs. And a lot of times it's either laced with it or it's all fentanyl. Oftentimes the counterfeit pills are all fentanyl, where you think you might be getting, somebody might be using an Oxycontin, maybe just to relieve some pain, and it's actually all fentanyl. Poly drug use is so prevalent nowadays, okay? So know this, that all these drugs, they all have harm. Fentanyl is the most common illegal drug that is killing more people now than ever before. Nishka, number 6.
All right. Stigma and negative labels like junkie, zombie, and crackhead often cause people with substance use disorder not to seek treatment because they feel embarrassed or ashamed.
Great job, everyone. Great job. Stigma is so important. And I got to tell you, with Dope Squad and the COPE and everyone has done such a great job. We have to change how society thinks. Now, Caitlin last week and Nick did a great job. I sat in and they did a great job talking about substance use disorder or addiction. I want to follow up with a couple of things that we even show younger kids, even in first grade. If you take a look, we talk about the slippery slope of addiction or substance use disorder, okay? Take a look at that car. A first grader would know it's difficult for that car to stop. Once you get on a slippery slope, what happens is oftentimes you go down, depending on what drug you're using, stimulant could affect your central nervous system with alertness and things like that. A narcotic or an opioid basically has a euphoric effect that is more of a sedative. And what happens is it's overwhelming. It hijacks your brain. So what happens is in a very short period of time, you become dependent physically and mentally. Then you go down that slope. If you stop using, you're going to get withdrawal symptoms. You could be nausea. It could be headaches. It could be diarrhea. And then they get more serious as you continue to use. And then you develop what's called tolerance. You need more of that drug to have the same effect. And then before you know it, within a very short period of time, your brain is hijacked because your brain releases dopamine. It's a feel-good chemical. So when you're doing something you really enjoy, your brain releases it and it lets your body know that you feel good about it. The problem with narcotics and opioids and some of the strong drugs, they overwhelm your system. So that's what your brain remembers. So all the things that were important to you before become less important. And all your brain wants is that drug again. And stigma is so important because many people, oftentimes you see them on the street, we see them at the worst times in their lives. But what happened was they have a hard time quitting because they get dope sick, it's called, where they're extremely sick. So know this, stigma, you're a big part of changing the stigma in society today. But this was covered last week with the number of deaths, but this is the more recent, 2019, 70,980 deaths, okay? That's a 4.6% increase. That's 194 people a day. That's 8 in 1 hour every day, okay? Philadelphia was the largest city, unfortunately, always leads the number in overdose deaths. And what we try to do is, in order to demonstrate it, just show, the Philadelphia Stadium where the Eagles play, and just to show the impact. Take a look at that stadium. It's full, okay? And then next slide, Kim. Every single seat is full. And in 1 year, that's how many people we lost. And I never know when I'm going to say this, but I want to tell you, I have gone to so many funerals and talked to so many parents, and we have to think about not only losing these people, but the families that the mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, okay? There was a beautiful young boy, and he was really a very good athlete, very smart. He had a lot of problems. He had a lot of medical problems. He had epilepsy, ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, ADD. And what happened was he started coping with his problems by drinking alcohol and then maybe using marijuana and then also getting into pills. And before you know it, he was hooked on heroin. And then he wound up living on the street because he was homeless, and all the symptoms and all the things we talked about, the sliding slope and a slippery slope. And then what happened was he overdosed 10 times. His 10th would be his last. Okay. That was my son. He died in 2017. And I'm trying to bring this up because trying to take what I learned, because every single day I ask myself, what can I do? What can I talk to kids and young adults and parents to try to help them so they don't go through what my family had to go through, and also everyone else, and losing all the people we do. So please, the stigma is so important. Next slide, Kim. And naloxone or Narcan, basically it's an opioid reversal. All it works is on opioids. So you need to know this because unfortunately at your age, you may be at a party, you could be at an event, you could be even on going down the street, driving or walking down the street and somebody's overdosing. Naloxone or Narcan is what basically reverses an opioid overdose. Fentanyl, painkillers, and heroin and all those drugs. It only works on opioids. And the only reason we mention a Good Samaritan law too, you need to know that almost every state, New Jersey has it, Pennsylvania has it, that someone cannot get in trouble for overdosing on drugs. Someone cannot get in trouble for calling 911 or trying to help someone. Giving them drugs is a different story, but trying to help somebody, the law was enacted to try to get people to help others. Next slide, please. So
the next few slides are going to illustrate important information, especially when you're working in prevention and you want to promote prevention. It's important to understand why young people, or any individual for that matter, uses drugs. It's also important to understand different risk factors individuals have, as well as protective factors. So when Bob and I go out and speak to audiences, we typically ask this question: why do you think teens use drugs? And it's amazing, especially amongst the young people, the responses are really dead on target. People intuitively sort of know what may lead to drug use or behaviors that are associated with drug use, okay? But again, some of the items listed here, I'm not going to read them all out, you can see them. But what I want to draw attention to is that remark on the top, is that teens who perceive little risk in using drugs are more likely to use drugs. That's why Bob and I are advocates for prevention, because knowledge empowers, and prevention to me is knowledge. It's knowledge ahead of time of what is out there and what risks are there. So that's why we're so passionate about it. As far as risk factors are concerned, with the next slide, we cover a lot of information as to why people do drugs, or what risk factors are there. And all of us as individuals, we all have one, two, maybe many of these risk factors. It's important to know your risk factors so you can navigate and manage your own behavior, okay? So for example, when I was a child, I lived in a household where my father was an alcoholic. Growing up, I saw what addiction did to a family, and I saw that I did not want that for my future. But at the same time, I knew as a young man, my role model had an addiction, and that I needed to be really careful that I didn't follow in those footsteps. So there's a lot of other factors that are involved: peer pressure, anxiety, trauma, okay? COVID-19, the epidemic, the pandemic that we're in right now, exasperates for a lot of people the risk factors, okay? But it's important to understand what those risk factors are. Another one that I want to point out to you is low self-esteem. And that is a very important concept to understand. Self-esteem is basically how you feel about yourself. And it's the sooner that you can acknowledge and take responsibility of the fact that you are responsible for developing a high self-esteem, the more powerful you are, the better off you are. So we try to talk to kids about that often, and we try to talk to them about different ways of achieving a higher self-esteem. And fortunately for all of us, we have protective factors. That could be a loving parent.
Next
That
one,
could
Kim.
be like what you're doing today, being involved in a drug prevention program. All of those things help keep you safe. I just want to point out again, as I typically do, with the protective factors, to understand that you as an individual, you are the protective factor for a younger sibling or cousin or even a friend that may have a problem. So it's important to understand the impact that you can have on other people. Next slide, please. And then the next slide, please. And then just say, just having a plan for when you are in a situation where you may be pressured into using drugs or having to make that decision. And we usually talk about this at length with kids that are in 6th grade that may be transitioning to middle school, or a class that may be transitioning to high school, or seniors that are transitioning to college. It's those age groups that usually find themselves in new situations with new friends, where sometimes they're faced with having to make that choice. So preparing yourself ahead of time is very important and very key. Next slide, please. Finding your passion is a really, really important part of becoming and staying drug-free. If a young person has a healthy passion, whether that's music or arts or sports, whatever it may be, something that they can go to when things are tough as a stress reliever, they're going to be much better off than a child or a person that doesn't have any passions or hobbies that may go to drugs or alcohol to make them feel better. So that's another part of the prevention model that we try to push. Next, please. This video is a video of DEA Educational Foundation and their dance academy. It's a fun illustration of how dance, for example, can be something that you can do to keep yourself elevated and away from bad behaviors. Whether you can play that, Kim. Okay, so again, that program is funded by the DEA Educational Foundation, and it's across the country. Bob and I, with our own individual prevention efforts, often recruit the help of hip hop fundamentals. That what we're able to do is to bring entertainment and fun with the importance of prevention. And sometimes, especially for a kid in elementary school, learning a message while doing a fun activity sort of leaves a longer lasting impression. The other thing that we often talk about to the younger audiences is about the importance of having dreams and what you want to do in the future. And again, we all know, and I want to reiterate that if you have dreams to become a chef, a police officer, an astronaut, whatever it may be, you're going to be able to achieve it. However, drugs in the mix are not going to help you get there. If nothing else, drugs are dream killers. And that's another part of our messaging with our audience, that they just don't want to sacrifice their dreams for a high. Next, please.
All right, polling question number 7. Living drug-free is a healthy way of life that should include A, knowing the risks, harm, and impact of drug use. C, reduce other risk factors, strengthen protective factors. E, discussions with parents, caregivers to reinforce healthy choices and decisions. Or G, talk with role models and mentors about tough situations. Or I, all of the above and more. All right, we have 30% that voted. 40%. 11 more people have to vote. $73. All right, we'll end it here.
Okay, next slide, please. Great job, guys. The truth of the matter is every one of those can help. It just depends on your individual circumstance. But the bottom line is, like I said, prevention and living drug-free, it's a way of life. It's all of those things and all incorporated. You may use some of them may at some points, different times, but it's all of that. So it's a way of, it's 24/7 drug. This is where we really want to get into some ideas and things. We want to have one more question that we really want to talk to you about some of the things we can do together. So Nishka, if you could just do number 8.
All right.
The real simple question. Thanks.
Only adults and professionals can make a difference in today's epidemic and environment. True or false? Oh, wow, 60%. All right, 10 more seconds. Okay.
Great job. Next slide, please. This is the most false statement you ever heard today. Okay. You are the difference. You can make a significant, the things that Dope Squad is doing, the things that Cope Cyber Club are doing. We are so inspired by that. We have so many plans to work with you in the future on other partnerships. So don't ever let anybody tell you actually make an impact on your peers, you can make an impact on your parents, and you're leaders even for siblings and other people. So this is an open-ended question. I just want to get some feedback from you now. And you can put it in the chat. And Nishka, if you want to open up, if somebody wants to talk, we welcome it either way. What impacts you the most and why won't you use drugs? We ask young people this all the time, especially now with COVID, with screen time. We need to make it count. As the COPE organization always says, the COPE group. So how do we make it count? What impacts you? Give us some ideas.
If you'd like to talk, just raise your hands, please. Anyone is welcome to talk.
Does anybody want to share anything? Either by chat or. And we covered a lot of the things that impact young people, but if not, we have another question. If not.
I can go.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So one thing a lot of youth can do is especially that I see, is a lot of youth don't report what they see, especially in schools, because there's such a stigma of like tattletaling.
Mhm.
So I think knowing that it's not really telling on someone, you're trying to help them. So reporting what you see and making sure that they get help is, I think, something that a lot of youth could do.
Thank you. Very
That's
insightful. Very
That's a
true.
really good point. And I guess that I think off the top of my head is something Bob and I would like to probably incorporate into our presentations with young people, because I never even considered that dynamic, that pressure not to tattletale versus saving someone or really, really helping someone. That's a really excellent point. Thank you.
Anyone else? Kim, go to the next question, please. Next slide.
Dope Squad members, please turn on your cameras.
We lost a few minutes with the tech, but are we able to get to the next slide? Question? I'll try it.
There we go.
The one before that, Kim. Well, let me ask you this, boys and girls. What can we be doing? We're here. What are some of the things that young people can do? And you are doing so many of them. You tell us, what are some of the ideas that you have for the future to partner with? You want a TV show that was great. You're doing PSAs. Tell us some of the other things that you want to do. And because we have a lot of ideas, but it's your creativity and your thinking outside the box and your initiative and commitment will really help. So anybody, please.
Lori, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that fostering conversations like this one is especially important. I feel like personally, it's not talked about a lot, mainly because a lot of kids, there is a stigma, of course, and mainly because a lot of kids don't think to talk about it, even though it is a prevalent issue. I don't see it talked about a lot, and I'm happy that we do things like this to help foster those kinds of conversations. Also, I apologize about my video. My camera's not working.
No, thank you for that. And we
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Lori. Can I ask you a question, Lori? Do you think the conversation occurs with kids and their parents enough? Like what have you observed as far as parents being comfortable in having a good conversation about prevention with their kids? What's your take on that?
Well, from what I've seen, I've never really considered it as a conversation that parents and children have, though it definitely should be.
Mhm.
It's always been more of a counselor thing or a teacher thing,
Okay.
if it ever were to be brought up. I feel like a lot of parents like to believe that their kids aren't experimenting with drugs, and I feel like a lot of parents would just jump to assume that their kids are the best they could be.
Great, very good. Because Bob and I also try to do work with parents, because believe it or not, Lori, some parents are uncomfortable, or they don't know how to start the conversation, or they don't feel equipped to have the conversation. But I can tell you, I'm a real advocate of having that conversation at home. So I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you.
Of course.
Could I expand on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I think that a lot of the times, parents feel like, or even children, they feel like they can't go to their parents because they will feel like their parents will feel like disappointed or feel ashamed, or they might feel angry. So they might in fear, they might not go to them. So I feel like if to decrease the problem, we need to create like help parents understand that it's okay that if your children are going through something, then it's okay for them to come to you, because
Mhm.
that's the only way they're going to feel comfortable. Because I feel like if we're not comfortable going to our parents, like who are we supposed to go to? So I think
Right.
that's how the problem gets even worse,
I agree.
because there's no one we can trust. So yeah.
I agree. And that's like, if you go back to our presentation today and remember, we went through the protective factors and the risk factors and things of that nature. A lot of times when Bob and I go out and speak to parents, there are some of the things that we point out to them, because again, unfortunately, there's always so much stigma around, which sometimes not only prevents treatment and recovery, but it stops prevention from occurring. And that's what we need to work on collectively as a group to make sure that people remove the stigma so that we can make progress in this. And having a conversation is the first step in that direction. So thank you very much for your feedback.
Does anyone else have any feedback? That's great. We appreciate it. And we're in the middle of Red Ribbon Week now, and I know you have a lot of initiatives you're doing. So, I want to congratulate each of you. Thank you very much for taking the time for that, because it's really important to us. Red Ribbon is a really important time. But give us some insight. Anyone else, please jump in. Because prevention, it's in order, again, what we say is a way of life. It doesn't have to be a curriculum. It doesn't have to be labeled prevention. It's something that it's how you live your life. It's you pursuing your dreams. It's you, trying to help someone else. We always say, we'll talk about youth being our future. The truth of the matter is you are the present and the future. You are part of this, a big part of the solutions. So we really appreciate your information, the input. We don't listen to the young people enough as far as we're concerned. And because you can make drastic changes in your schools and your communities, even educating your parents. So please give us some feedback. And this is a time where we really want to talk or ask a question or anything that you have, because this is really more of a dialogue. We lost a few minutes with the tech issues, but please, anybody, we welcome you to chime in.
Yeah, adding on to what the previous person said, I agree with that. I think that's a really good point that she brought up, because oftentimes when we like when we're dealing with issues like those and we don't know, and we're like embarrassed or ashamed to go to our parents, oftentimes we go to friends, and the problem with that is that they also might be not necessarily they could give you the best advice possible, because they're going through the same thing or like something similar at the time. And if that's the case, then they might not be able to lead you on the right path. And I think that's why that's a really good point that you brought up, that if we don't go to parents, then who are we supposed to go to?
Exactly. And I can speak as a parent. I know my kids probably at times did not want to come to me and talk to me, but I can tell you as a parent, I would say to them, of course, come to me. So a lot of times it's just the kid thinking that the parent's going to respond in a certain way, when in their heart, they want the very best for their children and they want to protect their children. So, but I understand the hesitancy, and parents need to understand that hesitancy and work towards eliminating that uncomfortableness through conversation. So everything that you guys are saying just helps confirm what we say when we talk to parents about, you need to talk, you need to be honest, you need to be open to hear what your child is saying, because growing up, teenage years, they're challenging and they're very difficult to do on your own, almost impossible. So you need a strong parent for sure.
We're in the worst of times right now with COVID and, being social isolation. And so when we talk about screen time, and I know Kim talks about this all the time, maximizing our screen time, making it most impactful. How do we do that? Somebody give us some ideas. Somebody give us maybe some something to focus on that maybe we're not focusing on, or just share with the other group if you don't mind, because that's really important. These are the most challenging times you may ever see in so many ways. Does anybody have any ideas or anything that they want to highlight?
I feel like right now, at least, it's hard for people to get out there and kind of advocate for the problem because of all the virtual stuff that's going on. But I feel like all we can really do is try and have more outreach like what we're doing right now, and try and get in touch with other associations like the DEA and stuff like that, and try to organize community outreach and stuff, because of the virtual situation that we're in, it's really hard for people to actually communicate with others. So I feel like there's not much else we can do, but I feel like a lot of people can try and put their effort into doing more stuff like this.
That's an excellent point. I think it's like Bob said earlier, I'm thoroughly impressed and really happy and proud of how well you guys do. I mean, I don't think you understand the impact that you have. You know, it may be a simple, you know, conversation with a friend, but never, ever underestimate the impact that you can have for the positive when it comes to prevention. Just simply being there as a friend and talking and knowing the right information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of kids don't understand. They just don't realize the dangers that may be involved. They don't understand how addiction can take over. They don't understand that if you start young, the likelihood of you having a lifetime of struggles as a result is really, really probably going to happen. And they're the important messages that Bob and I really want to get out to the younger kids, that they really need to understand how big of a decision it is and how harmful of a decision it is to use drugs. Because at 15, you make a lot of decisions and sometimes they're not the best decisions. But it scares me that a kid at 15 will make such a heavy decision that will stay with him for the rest of his life. That's hard, you know. So everything that you guys do, understand that you're helping with prevention. Like Bob said, you are the here and now, you know, and the future, but you're the here and now as well. So thank you very much.
And this may sound corny, but if everyone here, and I know you do this, if everyone here made it a point to touch someone's life, you whether it be your siblings, whether it be a friend, knowing the information you have and just the passion you have in this field, in prevention and education, just trying to help someone, that's so important. You can teach your parents things, believe it or not. So just from what we've seen, the knowledge base that you have and the things that you're doing has an impact. So we have to exponentially increase the people that are our leaders. Every one of you is a leader, and that just inspires us. We're under so many challenges with virtual. You know, we would love to just walk into a room and talk to you, sit down at a table with you and just talk. And it's really tough to do this. And you see, you have tech issues. You have limitations with time and the screens and things like that. But, you know, we're just dealing with the challenges we have. But know this, what you're doing does make a difference. And it's inspiring and it's contagious. You know, we would like to connect you with a Philadelphia focus group that we work with. I know Kim's dealing with not only the United States, but Canada. It's great to we could talk to people in other countries' youth, because youth have the best ideas out there. You are the present and the future. You are part of the overall solution, trying to change things that we can. So you have a lot of power. Please use it. And every one of you are leaders. Can't tell you how inspired we are. Mishka, do you have anything, or does anyone else have anything, or any questions?
Anyone? Last chance.
I don't really have a question, but like just like there's like something to add to like what others said. So I think we doing virtual and we being at home, we not talking to anyone, like we just locking ourselves in our room and like not involving ourselves in any like in-person conversation, especially like with people who we really care about. So I think that's something that's gonna act the risk factor of using what we shouldn't use. And I don't know if you understand me, but like I mean from what I experienced, I think the friends I hanged out with, the friends I know of, like we being in school last year, they were all cheerful, they're all nice and stuff. But like this year they just completely changed to another different person. I can't even understand them sometimes when I talk to them. And sometimes they just want to avoid me because they think I don't understand what they're going through, or they think I won't be able to help them. So I think from what other people pointed out today, I think I have an idea of how to help my friend. And I'm really grateful that everyone shared their ideas and stuff. So I'm really grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you really bring up an excellent point, and one that Bob and I have heard from a lot of different teens, that the isolation really, really is difficult. It's difficult on not only on the social front, but the academic front. There's so many challenges involved with this, but like you said, you reaching out to a friend, and continue to reach out, continue to be there, because without a doubt, this has had an impact psychologically on people. I don't care what your age is. You know, everything from not being able to see family as much as you want to see them, not being able to go to a, you know, school or to the workplace, the lack of socialization, all of it is very, very challenging. But even if we can reach out to each other virtually, it's better than sitting alone and not having the conversation. So I agree with you 100%. And thanks for pointing that out.
All right, I think we'll begin to wrap it up now. But thank you, Bob and Frank, for your wonderful presentation, stories, and the insightful conversation. Now we'll begin to move on to our open mic competition. Dope Squad held an open mic competition this month where the participants had to submit an original piece, whether it was art, a film, poem, or a short story based on the theme, "The right choice is not always the easy choice," which is actually a quote said by Rick Riordan, a New York Times bestselling author. Today we will be announcing the winners of this competition, but before we do so, we'd like to thank our participants for their submissions. It was really nice to see so many of you participate and submit such incredible pieces. I would now like to call the president of the COPE Cyber Lions Club, Lion Kimberly Haynes, to announce our winners and wrap up today's webinar. Winners, please stay behind after the webinar ends. Lion Kimberly?
Well, hello. And now I have to do my own tech run. So can everybody see me? Because I can't see myself.
We can see you.
Okay, good. So first of all, I just, I want to thank the Dope Squad. I want to thank, Lion Suburna for all of the work that you've done. I see District Governor Benita Davis from Texas. I want to give a shout out to the Lone Star Boot Crew for being with us today. Team Hope, the Dope Squad, Peach Posse. We have cyber chat groups popping up in Illinois with Harvey Police Department, with District 156, School District 156. So I just want to kind of, before I announce the winners of the competition, I have to take a second to reiterate to you all what Frank just said, and to just kind of always, it's always important to me, in the work that we do with our young people, we definitely are very, we're very grateful for us to be able to work with you as adults, because, in case you didn't know, there are so many people who you all have tuning in, who you all have paying attention to, working with other kids your age, who we as adults want to make sure that they're living healthy and drug-free lives. As Frank mentioned, we're all parents too, and we've all seen our own kids struggle through things. And so, to be able to work with you all is really phenomenal and fantastic. So before I get all mushy and get away from the longer piece, let me now, I wish I had a drum roll, start to announce the open mic competition winners. So third place, we have, with the poem Breathless, we have AmeriCourt Chabda. So AmeriCourt, so a round of applause. Second place, with a young man's dedication to commitment, we have Mohit Shah. And with the piece called Blurred Lines, our first place winner is Disha Raju. So I am very honored to announce those winners, and I'm very grateful that you guys were able to put together this great competition and to really encourage people to really kind of share what is important to them, share their ideas about preventing drug use and making sure that they're able to carry that message to their peers. As Frank and Bob also mentioned, this is Red Ribbon Week. So I want to thank the Dope Squad for rounding us out. This is the third in their series of webinars. Thank you, Frank and Bob, for being with us today. Thank you guys for all of the support that you've given, not only the Dope Squad and the infamous Team Zero, and as well as to the COPE Cyber Lions and the greater body of Lions. The work that you guys are doing with us on the coast in Philadelphia and New Jersey and Delaware, really is starting to shine a light that's helping us to start to spread the importance of engaging with our communities, engaging with our young people, and really lifting youth voices as the leaders of today and maturing into the leaders of tomorrow. So I want to thank our moderators that we've had over these past few days. We've had Ronak Sani, Pranav Joshi, Nishka Mehta, who was our moderator today. With the cyber chats, we also have chat box moderators. So those are the young people who make sure that conversation is going. A lot of times when we're talking, not just with kids, but also with adults, people don't always want to take their cameras off and get into the conversation. So I want to thank Anika and Vidur for being our chat box moderators over this series. We also want to thank our webinar planning committee. That is Nishka Mehta, Pranav Joshi, and Ronak Sani. You guys have done an excellent job. And I want to tell you that over the course of these 3 Sunday conversations, I want to let you guys know you have collectively reached more than 200 Lions and community members who have been so impressed and humbled by the work that you all are doing. We definitely want to send a shout out to our content creation team, Anika, Vidi, Adiv, Lori, and Ronak. Thank you guys so much for making sure the slides are in place and making sure that we've got all of our speakers queued up, and making sure that, things that you guys are sending out. So you guys have done an excellent job on that. And to all of the Dope Squad team, thank you so much for everything that you've done. And so I want to make sure that as we close this out, that you guys are hanging with us throughout the rest of Red Ribbon Week, which closes on the 31st. We have on the 26th is tomorrow, we'll be hosting the mental health awareness. It's a 2-hour introductory session. We are also hosting later on in the month of November. And due to popular demand, we've also had to open up a 3rd session. We've had more people than we can handle that have come in for that. So I really appreciate all the likes, the shares, and the registrations on that. Also, between the 26th and 28th, we've got our Long Star Boot Crew out of Texas. We've got Team Hope and Peach Posse out of New Jersey. We've got the gym groups out of Illinois and Girls Talk. So everybody's going to be online doing door decorations, posting their pictures. So please like and share it. If you get a chance, go to your Facebook search engine and type in Make Screen Time Matters with the hashtag, and you'll be able to see everybody that has been participating this week. We are definitely looking forward to our next adventure. And until then, I want you all to remember to be brave, be happy, and be drug-free. And most of all, make screen time matter.